Today we're going to have a little lecture about ukulele binding. Now binding is the treatment that the ukulele gets along the edge, like right here. And if you look, this white stuff is the binding. Okay, so here's my my current configuration of the ukulele, and as you can see, if you look at the edge, there is no binding. It's just the top, the butts, the sides. And so that joint right there, if you look here, you'll see there's ingrain and whatnot. And right now this joint is very, very sharp. It hasn't been rounded over, and there's just not enough thickness there to give you much of a rounded edge. So resting your arm on this to play it, you would it wouldn't feel comfortable. Even if you rounded that edge, it would leave a very thin piece of wood abutting the sides, and that would not necessarily be very durable. So to improve the durability and the comfort of the artist playing the ukulele, I'm planning to put binding on. Hence we have a binding machine, and the purpose of the binding machine is to cut the channel that the binding is glued into. And so you create a little step on the side where the top meets the back of the ukulele, and that's where you put the binding in. But the binding is thicker than the sides, so to allow you to install binding, you have glued kerfing into that joint on the inside of the ukulele. And so that kerfing, in addition to strengthening the overall integrity of the bond between the sides and the top or bottom, it's also thick enough so that you can then route a channel. So you can route a channel, and here you can see that little groove. It's a step. You know, here you put a dark background so it shows a little better. We've routed a little step in there, and in that step you can install binding. So the binding lays in the channel like this, and the binding is bent to allow it to go flush. And then after you've installed it, the binding is usually a little proud of the top, and it's a little proud of the sides. And so after you've got it glued in there and well secured, then you go back in and you sand everything flush, and you can round over this edge, and now you have a thick enough edge so that when you round it over, you can create a gentle enough break so it's comfortable to hold. Zoom in here a little bit. What this jig does is you have a router here that is what's going to cut the channel. And then you have rollers here, which is what supports the side of the ukulele. So ideally the side of the ukulele rests on the rollers. The router, which is underneath, cuts the channel. So you use the rollers to guide things. There's a bushing here that the top of the ukulele rubs against. And as the top rubs against that, the material is carved away. And the key is to travel in a proper direction so that the wood tends to cut and not to shatter. So we'll try to do that. So after that disaster on my first test, I made a test piece for the second test, and that's this guy right here. So I'll be trimming off this extra waste material here, which to create just maybe 1/8 of an inch or so, or maybe even a little less of simulated top sticking out. And then after I've trimmed that off, then I'll take this thing and I'll place it on top of the roller. I'll start the router. I'll set this for a shallow cut, then I'll start the router, and then trim all the way around. And after I've done that, then I'll cut a little deeper, and after I've reached the depth I want to reach, I'll stop. So that's the plan. like we had a roaring success here. I took 3 gentle passes on there, changing the depth setting, and worked our way up to what looks like pretty good depth. I went ahead and cut some maple strips that I'll bend, and I'll go ahead and install in there. But you can see that this fits pretty well into the groove that the channel. So all I have to do now is bend this into a circular form and then glue it in place, and I'll sand it flush and see how it looks. Okay, so the rubber band's off and whatnot. Turned out okay. There's a oops right here by one of the joints where I didn't realize, because it was covered up with tape, this thing wasn't seated properly, so it didn't do very good there. But since it's just a test, I'm not too worried about it.